So we covered what algae are, what they need to survive, and how important they are to this planet. Now, let's talk about algae diversity, or different kinds of algae. You might want to get comfy. There are a lot of different kinds of algae. Let's start with greens. The green algae are a group of both micro and macroalgae that fall under the phylum Chlorophyta. These algae get their name due to their green color, which comes from pigments in their chloroplasts, chlorophyll A and B. These organisms grow very quickly, and there are about 8,000 different species of green algae. Next are the blue-green algae, or cyanobacteria. As the name suggests, these are bacteria that can photosynthesize. They get their name because the cells have a blue-green color due to a pigment called phycocyanin. Fun fact, blue M&Ms use phycocyanin for their natural blue coloring. Some of these species can fix nitrogen, or take nitrogen in our air and convert it to a form of nitrogen the algae can use. This allows blue-green algae to grow in areas other algae cannot. There are about 2,700 species of cyanobacteria. Next up are the diatoms, which is a type of microalgae that fall in the class Bacillariophyceae. Say that 5 times fast. These microscopic organisms produce a siliceous or glass skeleton to live in. Similar to a turtle shell, this silica shell protects the diatoms. They are brown in appearance because they produce a pigment called carotenoids. This is the same pigment responsible for making pumpkins orange and flamingos pink. Scientists estimate there are between 100 and 200,000 species of diatoms on Earth. The dinoflagellates, or dinoflagellate, are a class of microalgae mostly found in our oceans, but some can be found in freshwater as well. They are motile, or can move with the help of 2 flagella. Zooxanthellae are a dinoflagellate that live within the cells of corals. This is a symbiotic relationship where corals offer protection to the algae, while the algae provides sugars to the coral. One of our favorite dinoflagellates is Pyrocystis. What does pyro make you think of? Fire, right? Well, Pyrocystis has a unique ability called bioluminescence. So what is bioluminescence? Let's start with these couple of photos of a dinoflagellate being disturbed by either the tide or the kayaker's paddle. When the algae is disturbed, it is believed that they bioluminesce, or glow, as a protective measure, either to scare away predators or to attract larger predators that will eat whatever is eating the algae. The brown algae is a class of macroalgae called Phaeophyceae. These organisms are multicellular. Some organisms make alginate, which we use as a natural vegetarian thickening agent, like gelatin, just from plants. Kelp forests, a type of algae called Macrocystis, can be over 200 feet tall. That's like a 14-story building. There are currently more than 1,500 known species of brown algae. Who studies algae anyway? Who helps figure out all this cool stuff? Phycologists do. A phycologist is a person who studies algae. Let's meet a few. You're going to hear from Dr. Jessie Trawler and Dr. Jake Nally, the 2 phycologists who helped create the Algae Academy.
Hi, my name is Jessie Trawler and I am a senior phycologist at Global Algae Innovations and one of the co-creators for the Algae Academy curriculum. So a little bit about me. I received my undergraduate degree, my bachelor's, at UC San Diego in molecular biology, which is the study of DNA and protein and how that functions in the cell. And then what I learned there, I took on to my PhD in marine biology at the same school, studying algae. So right now I work for a company called Global Algae Innovations. And our company we have operations in San Diego, but also we have a large-scale farm on the island of Kauai in the state of Hawaii. And it's one of the largest in the world. We do a lot of different research operations focused on outdoor production of algae. So ultimately, we want to grow algae very large scale at farms like the one in Hawaii for the use of products like biofuel and aquaculture feed and human food, ultimately hoping to change the world with the production of algae. And so why do I love algae? Which I have been studying algae for quite some time, all the way since my bachelor's degree. And I really love them because they're very small organisms. Microalgae is what I study, but they have an enormous impact on the planet and for our future. So, they're responsible for 50% of the oxygen that we breathe in the atmosphere. And because they are small but mighty, they really have the potential to help solve a lot of our problems that we have existing today. So things like climate change and world hunger, algae might be a solution to these problems. So let's see, what else? Why do I love science? Oh man, this is a tricky one because I could go on and on for why I love science. But what it boils down to is I love that you can find science everywhere. So there are researchers that study the love between family members. There are folks who study the leaves in different plants. And it just means there's just an endless amount of questions to ask about the planet and the solar system and the universe, and a lot of information to be had. And so we can always explore that and be curious about the world around us. And that's one big reason why I love science. And what is my favorite type of algae? Well, you will learn about it in the curriculum. So they're a type of algae called diatoms. And I really love them. I studied them for my doctorate. They're very important in the ocean systems. So and they are also responsible for about 25% of the oxygen that we breathe. So they're very, very common in the environment. And they are very cool too, because their cell walls, their home basically is made of glass. And with this glass cell wall, they make these very beautiful ornate structures that are they look like little sand castles, miniature sand castles. And they're quite beautiful if you look at them under the microscope. So I hope you learned a little bit, and I hope you continue to learn about algae this week, and I look forward to hearing your feedback. Thank you.
Hey everyone, my name is Dr. Jake Nally. I'm the Director of Agronomy at Qualitas Health. I'm coming to you today from West Texas at one of our algae farms located in Imperial, Texas. You can see behind me actually one of our algae production ponds. So Qualitas Health is a nutraceutical company based in Texas, and we make omega-3 supplements that we actually get from the algae you can see growing behind me. I mentioned I was the Director of Agronomy, and so what exactly does that mean? What do I do on a regular basis? So my main job is to focus on the health and the well-being of our algae crop. We have two different farms, the one here in Texas and one in Columbus, New Mexico. And it's my job to work with both locations to make sure that we're producing the most amount of algae possible at the highest quality. And what's interesting is those folks are actually using some of the same techniques you're going to use this week in Algae Academy, from looking at algae under the microscope to tracking the growth rate of your algae culture. All of those things are super important in understanding exactly what's going on in a big pond just like this. So how did I get into algae? I went to Loyola University in Chicago as an undergraduate. I studied biology and environmental science, and both of those degrees were really interesting in understanding that science can be used in this way to move society forward in a really conscious way. And so I took that passion and that interest into a PhD program at Michigan State University, and that's where I first started working with algae. So my project was looking at how we could make biofuels from algae, and although that's not something we're currently doing today, it's something we might need to be using in the future. And so after I graduated there, I think I really realized how important and how amazing the potential of algae actually is. And so this is what brought me to Qualitas Health. I really do think algae is going to be something extremely important in our everyday lives. It's something we already interact with and we didn't even really know it. But as we move forward in time, we're going to start seeing it more and more things. So it's going to be in the food that we eat. It's going to be in some of the medicine that we're taking. It's going to be fed to animals that we ultimately eat, like our cattle and our pigs and our chickens. It's already built into aquaculture. We might start seeing it be used as plastics, and we might be using it to remediate old sites that are worn out and have high pollution. So there are so many things that algae can be used for, and it's really interesting to be working kind of right at the forefront of that. And so in addition to the work that I do at Qualitas, I also am one of the curriculum developers for Algae Academy. So I just want to take a quick second to say thank you for all being here. We're super excited to have you guys, and we really hope that you enjoy the curriculum over the next couple of days, and also that you find something interesting in algae. Thank you, guys.
We know that algae are the foundation of our aquatic food webs, but they can also be extremely beneficial to us and have many, many uses. For example, did you know there's algae in your toothpaste? Yes, thickening agents from macroalgae are used in toothpaste to give it that paste-like consistency. Let's learn more. Algae can be used for food. Here is a seaweed salad. That's just a diced up helping of macroalgae. Some algae have high protein content and will soon be available as a protein powder for shakes and smoothies, like whey and soy proteins. Medicines, like nutritional supplements you can find at the grocery store. This is an area being heavily researched and new products come out all the time. One great example is algae omega-3 that is added to milk to promote brain development in children. Fuel. We will talk a lot about algae for biofuels. Algae are a great source for energy, and they are renewable, meaning that they are naturally replenished and have no end. Cosmetics. From face lotions to toothpaste and shampoos, algae is in a lot of beauty products. Pollution cleanup. Algae love to grow in water that have high levels of nutrients and contaminants, or what we call pollution. Through simply reproducing, algae suck up a lot of nitrogen, phosphorus, and heavy metals in the water, remediating the water, or cleaning it up. Fertilizer. If you collect a bunch of algae and dry them out, their dried out cells are a great slow-release fertilizer with plenty of nitrogen and phosphorus for your plants. As you can see, algae are in a lot of things, and you will be able to explore that for yourself in just a few minutes. Have you ever seen algae listed as an ingredient on a product you use? This diagram gives an overview of biofuel production. You start with cultivation, where you begin to grow your algae. Next, harvesting, where you start to remove the algae from the water. Then it's on to processing, where you start pulling out the oils from the algae. Finally, you get your product, the end goal of growing the algae and something that can be sold for profit. While you watch this video, try to keep the previous diagram in mind and try and compare the two. This video is about Global Algae Innovations, one of our Algae Academy supporters. Global Algae is developing technologies for the algae sector that will help us realize the true potential of algae.
So this is the dried algae product. After we dry it, we grind it up into powder and then we extract the oil out of it. That oil is then refined into diesel fuel or jet fuel. The fuel that we're producing is exactly the same in terms of performance as gasoline or diesel or jet. It's just a lot cleaner. I think the big difference is that all the other biofuels, you're growing it, you're just getting biofuel. In this case, every gallon of biofuel, you get 10 pounds of food with it.
Dave Hazelbeck is the CEO and founder of Global Algae Innovations, a San Diego-based company growing algae on a farm in Hawaii, which he thinks could change the landscape of food and oil production.
There's studies that show with algae grown to replace a large percentage of the animal feed, you could actually solve global warming to a large extent simply by doing that. Second thing is that the leading cause of global water impairment is runoff from agriculture. When we grow algae, there's no runoff. All the nutrients are captured in the algae. Environmentally is for deforestation. The leading cause of deforestation is for food production. With algae producing 40 times more per acre, that means if we plant 1,000 acres of algae, that's 40,000 acres of crops that don't need to be planted. So the work here we're doing is extremely important. The world desperately needs algae biofuels and algae protein production. It's going to have a big impact economically. It's going to have a big impact on reducing poverty, improving standards of living, because it'll create jobs and revenue in rural areas. That's why I decided to start this company, so that it could happen quickly, because it's too important for the world for it not to happen. So we're standing right now in one of our larger algae raceways. This is about a 2-acre raceway, but these raceways can be scaled to much larger. We look at making individual raceways up to 200 acres. And this is next to a power plant. It's unique because that allows us to capture carbon dioxide and avoid that discharge and reuse it, and that prevents it from going into the atmosphere and causing global warming. If every power plant had an algae farm next to it, it could potentially solve the global warming issue entirely.
In simple terms, algae is fairly easy to grow, and it's able to flourish just about anywhere, whether it be freshwater, seawater, or brackish water. All it really needs is a good supply of carbon dioxide and plenty of sunshine. And while the location of Global Algae Innovations in Kauai makes sense, Hazelbeck's team has come across some obstacles trying to scale the process up.
You can see with all these tremendous benefits, why aren't we doing it now, and why hasn't it been done? The problem is that the costs are too high throughout the entire process. And so it really requires hundreds of innovations throughout the entire process in order to reduce the cost, because it was about 10 times too high.
The problem associated with large-scale production has put similar companies out of business, but the approach of global algae innovations is different. Instead of seeing a roadblock, Hazelbeck and his team saw the potential to innovate solutions.
Our approach was different in that we looked at every single step, developed a model to look at the costs, and the other thing is we didn't give up on any critical issue. So a gallon of oil when we started would have been about $30 a gallon. Now, with the innovations we've made over the last few years, we're down in the range of $2 to $3 a gallon as a projected cost. Now, we're not there yet from the standpoint of production, but depending on how fast we can get to scale, we can potentially have solutions within the next few years, and that's really exciting. It'll change the geopolitics of the world. A lot of the reasons we have wars are because of fights over resources. And by creating a more equitable distribution, with countries being able to make their own, it should lead to a more stable and peaceful world.
Algae biofuel could potentially be used in engines that we already have, and there would be no additional infrastructure needed, as it would be available at your local gas station.
As we develop technology, we plan to partner with lots of people to have it expand in other areas. We're not trying to be the only company doing this because we're in it because of the impact. I always talk with our team, what they're doing is going to change the entire world in the sense of both the protein and the oil production, because both are desperately needed.
I know what you're thinking. Where is all this oil, though? Much like a bear, algae stores fats inside their cells for energy they can use later. We call these fats, or oil, lipids. The picture on the left shows chloroplasts inside the cell, red, and then droplets of green lipids. Some cells can be over 80% fat. This cell is so full of fats that lipids leak out of the cells. This graph compares the annual production of traditional agricultural crops and algae. Algae is extremely productive because we can harvest the algae every couple of weeks rather than once a season. It's important to think of algae as an addition to the food system. It is not going to replace anything. We need all the food we can get as the human population continues to rise. This is the potential of algae. We have a lot of work to do to get there, but we will get there. Qualitas is also one of the industry sponsors of Algae Academy. They cultivate nanochloropsis to produce omega-3 supplements that are for heart and brain health, and are developing the first algae protein product. The farm they show in the video is where the algae we will grow comes from.
Wadering up. Woo! Whoa! Oh, it's very slimy. We're literally standing on the food of the future.
Yes.
Right now.
This is the foundation of the next generation of farming and food.
By 2050, the world's population will hit almost 10 billion. It's going to take up to a 70% increase in food production to feed those 2.5 billion extra mouths. To survive, we need to reinvent the way we farm and eat. There's a few people in the middle of the New Mexican desert who believe they have a tiny green, protein-rich solution: algae. Why does it smell like the ocean here in the middle of the desert?
It's the salty water that we use. The strain of algae that we grow has been isolated from the northern Atlantic Ocean, so we try to make it as close to the ocean as we can.
Well, it certainly smells like it. This algae is called nanochloropsis. Unlike most crops, it doesn't require fresh water to flourish. That's a big deal. Today, 70% of the planet's available fresh water goes towards crops and raising livestock.
The beauty of our harvesting system is that we're able to recycle 95 to 97% of our water crystal clear and just keep using it over and over and over again.
Water efficiency like that means you can farm algae in a desert. Why have your farm here?
There's land as far as the eye can see that's not being used for anything else. We're on top of a salty water aquifer, which is what our algae needs.
And when it comes to solving this potential food shortage, land matters. About 37% of the land on this planet is dedicated to agriculture. As farmland grows scarce, algae offers an alternative. Many more harvests, no fertile soil required.
One of the interesting things about algae that leads to the much more higher yield than traditional crops is actually that we do this year-round. With corn, you plant once, you harvest once.
Right.
But this stuff, we might harvest a single pond as much as 2 or 3 times a week.
Despite all these qualities that make algae such an attractive crop, it's algae's value as food that's most remarkable. Iwi says this strain is about 40% protein and contains all of the essential amino acids humans need.
This is the final product from the farm.
This is your green gold right here.
Yes, ma'am.
Meat has those nutrients too, but it uses up a lot more of our finite resources like water and land, not just for the animals, but to grow their food too. As for other plant proteins, some estimates say that algae can produce 7 times the amount of protein that soybeans could on the same amount of land.
Yeah, it's just salty.
Just salty.
Can't believe I just did that, but it was...
The thing about food, though, people have to eat it.
Hello, Rachel.
Miguel Calatayud is the CEO of Iwi. It's his job to convince the world that pond scum should be on the menu.
People think of algae and they go, ugh, they don't go yum.
The protein we are producing is not going to be green, it's not going to change the flavor, it's not going to be any different from what they are used to. This is the success, when people see algae as another vegetable.
It's no different than broccoli.
Not different at all. Algae is one of the most productive vegetables that you can find in Earth, and at the same time is one of the most sustainable ones. We are not bringing algae as an alternative. This is in addition to conventional crops.
Miguel and Rebecca aren't the first people to recognize the unique power of this tiny marine plant.
People have been working on algae since at least the early 50s, trying to figure out how to do what it is that we're doing.
And most of them have been unsuccessful. In the early 2000s, algae was championed as an excellent source of biofuel. But the prohibitively high cost of harvesting and processing made the biofuel boom go bust. Iwi is staking its future on a different approach, that in order for algae to scale, growing it has to be as easy as growing any other crop.
We talk about it as farming on purpose because we want to break the paradigm that algae is industrial microbiology, that it's biotech, but that's not what we're doing.
The first step towards algae a la carte? Supplements. Today, Iwi is packaging this algae into omega-3 soft gels. It's a market valued at more than $33 billion. But you don't save the world with supplements and smoothies. Iwi has much bigger goals. They want their algae's protein infused in everyday foods.
Prior to today, you may have heard of algae before. Maybe the recent harmful algal blooms that have been impacting the Great Lakes or Florida. The blooms are normally blue-green algae, cyanobacteria, or dinoflagellates. These blooms occur because the water has been enriched and polluted with high levels of nitrogen and phosphorus from fertilizer runoff. Farmers fertilize their crops and homeowners fertilize their lawns, and some of that is washed away with rain and can end up in lakes, streams, or oceans. These blooms can be deadly, producing toxins that can hurt shellfish, birds, fish, manatees, your pets, and even humans. Every U.S. coastal and Great Lakes state experiences harmful algal blooms. But there's hope. Algae sees themselves as eco-pioneers. They are creating innovative solutions to lead industries to a sustainable future. One of those innovations has been to harvest these harmful algal blooms, removing the algae from the water and turning it into a more sustainable plastic. They are making plastics for 3D printers and foams that can be used in shoes, backpacks, and other clothing items.
We're surrounded by an incredible abundance of energy and power. We have all the resources we need, if only we can harness and harvest our planet's potential. As we've proven time and time again, we have the ability and ingenuity to do incredible things when we put our minds to it. But for all of our innovation, we've now reached a point where the misuse of our precious resources threatens our entire civilization. From our use of the great natural abundance that we've been entrusted with, we've created a new abundance, but not always in good ways. While organisms like algae have thrived in our increasingly polluted environments, their success has come at great cost to other creatures, which we depend on for our survival. What if we could use this new abundance of algae to create the materials we need, while disrupting the cycles of pollution that are bringing us to the brink of environmental catastrophe? Soloplast is a revolutionary bioplastic technology that shifts the paradigm of consumer manufacturing by harnessing the power of the sun and converting algae, a product of waste and pollution, into diverse, sturdy, sustainable, and affordable materials that can be made into almost anything under the sun, creating healthy food, water, and environments for us all to use and enjoy. At Algix, we're formulating the potential of algae.
We've learned that algae are really great, but let's recap. We've learned that they are fast-growing. They can be used for food, feed, fuels, beauty products, fertilizer, and even clean up pollution. They can produce a lot of oil too, meaning they could be the best biofuel source we have. While algae are growing, they are breathing in carbon dioxide, and we have way too much CO2. So this is really good for the planet. To grow algae, we don't need to take over agricultural lands, meaning algae won't compete with us producing our food. Remember what we learned earlier? A phycologist is a person who studies algae. Well, you're all phycologists now, so let's get to work. Your first job as a phycologist is to look for algae used as an ingredient in some everyday items like milk, pudding, or yogurt. We provided some food labels for you to look at, but you can also search online to see if algae is an ingredient in your favorite food or cosmetic. When looking for algae as an ingredient, look for words like carrageenan, agar, and alginate. Happy hunting!